some castle goring from Mickey and from me this hot and sunny and wonderful afternoon. Ah, Mickey is being particularly sweet this afternoon, but then she's always very sweet, but she's been super sweet this afternoon. I think it's important that from time to time I keep you abreast of how everybody else feels. And I think some of the comments and some of the remarks are invaluable because they show the thinking of everybody. And since I get thousands of them, when I choose representative ones, I think it imparts really important information, which is what people truly feel. The first comment is from Thomas Holland, who says, "It seems us commoners are better bred than Harry and definitely better than Meghan." Couldn't agree more, Mr. Holland. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. I just thought it's interesting that members of the general public make such penetrating observations. Another one comes from Heidi James, who actually is one of several people who have been good enough to write in to correct me, because I don't know, those of you who saw the last video might recall that I thought that maybe Queen Anne and Queen Mary II had been born on the continent. I wasn't sure. Well, I was surely wrong. Sorry, bad girl. Because in fact, they were both born at St. James's Palace. As Heidi James says, forgot to mention that Queen Mary and Queen Anne were born in St. James's Palace. She's one of several people who were kind enough to point this out. Thank you very much. Just goes to show you shouldn't sort of guess, because that's when you begin to get into trouble. But I'll tell you, my thinking was really simple, because their mother was the daughter of the Earl of Clarendon. Her name was Lady Anne Hyde. That was the first marriage for several centuries between a member of the British royal family and somebody who was not royal but was merely an aristocrat. And I suppose in my skewed thinking, I calculated and thought, oh, well, they must have been born during the interregnum. In fact, they were born after the interregnum. So I stand very gratefully corrected on that point. South African Dominion says, in terms of Princess Alice and Princess Mary Louise's memoirs, no, Princess Alice wrote for my grandchildren. Absolutely right, my dear. And as soon as I read it, I thought, silly me. Princess Mary Louise wrote my Memoirs of 6 Reigns. Absolutely right. I stand corrected, and I'm really grateful for the corrections. You know it says, Lady Colin Campbell, you look just like the actress Carrie Nye. I couldn't figure out who you reminded me of, but you two could be sisters. I'm reading this out because it's a vignette of my past. In 1975, Fielder and Sally Webster had me for dinner at their magnificent, sumptuous, pre-war apartment on, I think it was Park Avenue. Oh, I mean, you know, one of those fabulous 20-something room apartments with every room being as big as in a British castle. Just magnificent. Who was there for dinner as well? Carrie Nye. She was the wife of Dick Cavetts, who at the time was a huge TV star in America, because he presented the Dick Cavetts show. There was the Dick Cavetts show, and there was the Johnny Carson show, which I think was called The Tonight Show. And they were there at dinner. And I remember, this is pure innocent gossip, I remember that Elvis Presley's name came up. And she was from somewhere very near where Elvis Presley came from. And I said how much I liked his music. And she said she loved his music, but was I aware of the fact that he was from a dirt poor background? And I said, yeah, I had some idea that he was not from a grand background. And she said, well, no, it really was like dirt poor. She said almost Appalachian dirt poor. So I just say that for what it's worth. She was lovely. I looked her up to see if there is a resemblance, and I suppose there could be. But I don't think my father knew her mother. And I don't think her father knew my mother. So I don't think we're sisters. Am I not being mischievous and naughty? Now, we'll plunge into the questions. Connie Miranelli says, hello, Lady C. I love watching your videos. I hear that Harry has a 4-book deal now with a second to be released once the Queen has passed on. What do you think he is up to? I think it is so despicable to even think of hurting his grandmother like this. 5 exclamation marks. I think the Queen should disown him and remove the titles. 1 exclamation mark. He is a train wreck. 1 exclamation mark. Many would agree with you, my dear. Many would agree with you. What is he up to? Well, of course, since that announcement that emanated from the Sussex camp about the 4-book deal, there has been another announcement saying that that was not accurate. You see, what the Sussexes do is they leak information. They fly kites, so to speak. If the kite flies high, fine. If there's any doubt as to the reception, they fly another kite, or they deny. It's really a very, I struggle to find a suitable word, but let us alight upon a reprehensible form of propagandism. They are playing with us. They are playing with the royal family. They are like naughty, not very kind children who prod and poke and basically torment animals. We are the animals who are being prodded and poked, and the royals are the ones who are being prodded, poked, and tormented. Well, of course, now the Queen is not stupid, and even if she had been stupid, she'd have had to be remarkably stupid to think, well, if the book can only be published after I'm dead, that means the contents are pretty dreadful. They violate my privacy. They are going to touch upon subjects that should never be revealed. Harry is going to betray the trust I had in him. That has to be her thinking. There can be no other thinking from a thinking human being in a situation like this. I understand that there is not great relief at the palace that the announcement has been shot down with a claim. And another announcement denying the original contents of the original announcement. Because they're wise to Harry and Meghan's games, they're also wise to the fact that there's not a word that they say that anybody can trust. And they're not trusting the word. What a present to give to a loving, devoted grandmother who is grieving the loss of a beloved grandfather, her husband of 70-something years. What a parting shot. Granny, as you're checking out, I'm gonna make sure that all the dirty linen is aired, and what makes it worse is nobody relies upon Harry's aversion of events, because memories invariably vary when Harry comes up with any version of events. You think the Queen should disown him? I've got news for you. Various members of the royal family, various aristocrats, various courtiers, several people at the palace, various members of both major political parties and the third minor political party, all agree. All agree. People have a lot of respect for and affection for the Queen. Nobody likes seeing an old woman being tormented the way she is being tormented by her supposed beloved grandson. You think he's a train wreck? That, my dear, is a very charitable explanation. And you think his titles should be removed? Well, we have been into this before, but I will simply reiterate, it's not as simple as straightforward as you might think. Hence why it is important that everybody who has any regard for the Queen, Prince Charles, Prince William, what's going on at the moment, show your sympathy, show your support, sign that petition. Make it so overwhelmingly obvious to them that you are inviting them, you, the public, are inviting them, whether you are in America, Canada, England, Jamaica, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Tuvalu, Fiji, it doesn't matter. France, anywhere, sign the petition. It is the most effective tool that will be able to be used in a constructive way that allows honour to be seen to be done all around. I can't go into it more than that. Linda Johnson says, Lady C, a question. Do you think we should have peaceful demonstrations? That's my girl. I love the spirit. For the royal family to know how we really feel about this evil duo. That's a question, by the way, as well, question mark. I have so much respect for the royal family. I think it's so disgusting how they are treating the Queen. The country have had enough. Linda Johnson, thanks so much. Linda Johnson, I kiss you. Oh, bless you. So kind, so sweet. I don't think demonstrations would be a good idea. The royal family is supposed to be a unifying force in the country. They are supposed to be representative of all of the people, even the people who do not agree with them. they would not want their supporters demonstrating in the streets. They really wouldn't want it. It's it's counterproductive. It doesn't sit well with what royalty is all about. Having said that, I think it's a wonderful idea. I just don't think that we should encourage it at this point. But if Harry and Meghan show up, I would never discourage people from showing their true sentiments as they observe them coming and going. That, I think, is a different matter altogether. Binky Bink says, question for Lady C. I read in your book that Diana's relationship with the entire royal family improved greatly after her divorce. She lived just a year after this divorce was granted. I've never heard you mention the extent to which Diana might have turned her boys against either their father, their father's family, or both. And how much of this turning against would you suspect Diana did deliberately, and how much inadvertently? Thank you so much. That's a very good question. I have to tell you, Diana's relationship with the royal family had a veneer of civility after the divorce in the last year with some members of the royal family. All the members of the royal family wouldn't speak to her. Princess Margaret wouldn't speak to her. Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, wouldn't speak to her. I just use those two as examples. Because Diana's son was going to be king, it was necessary for the family, and also really for family reasons as well, but primarily because William was going to be king, and Diana was the mother of a future king, that she should be treated with a degree of respect. Now, there are parallels in this situation with Meghan and Harry, because the family believes that Meghan and Harry, even though they have behaved disgracefully, that they should still be treated with respect. Disrespecting the decencies and avoiding the courtesies are not the marks of civilized people, even when you know that those civilized people are your adversaries. So, don't think that because people spoke to Diana, who had been furious with her, that the relationship was good. It was better, but it wasn't good. Nobody trusted her. Everybody knew she was a wild card and that she should not be trusted. They used to use the word treacherous to describe her, as well as dishonest. I'm just using two of the words that they used to use to describe her. However, she realized that she had made a huge error with the Martin Bashir interview. She started to mend fences. She started to be nicer to the Prince of Wales. She even made it known not only to the Prince of Wales, but to several people who were surrounding her, and I now speak from personal knowledge, that she was prepared to accept Camilla as his wife. Of course, she died too soon. She died when Camilla was being introduced, as taken out of the shadows, so to speak, and put into the limelight. And Diana died. So that whole plan had to be aborted because the public reaction to her death was so completely extreme and unexpected by everyone, absolutely everyone. It was a surprise to everyone. So the relationship to just move on was, even though it was better, it was not good. Diana actually, I don't think that she set out to destroy her Charles's relationship with the boys. She certainly set out to gain their sympathy. And, you know, Diana was a very convincing actress, and a rarely convincing actress enacts the part so convincingly that even though she may be acting, you will think she believes it, whether she does or doesn't. And as and when it suited her, Diana would alight upon a subject, one of the subjects of which was Camilla, incidentally. And so the children witnessed a lot of turmoil, but she always admitted that Charles was a good father. Privately, but publicly, she tried to get him the reputation of being a cold and uncaring and disconnected father, none of which was true. She also used to play what were called at the time by people in the circle silly buggers games. For instance, refusing to allow the children to go on a shooting weekend, and keeping them with her and taking them to a cinema and giving them popcorn, which they didn't like, incidentally. They wanted to go on their shooting weekends. Because by the time Diana died, the children had grown up enough, and they had understood enough that when they were with her, it was very metropolitan, while when they were with their father and their father's family, they had a very countrified way of life. And I have to tell you, they much rathered that. So there's all of that to consider. I do not think that either William or Harry actually was set up against their father by Diana. Of course, they observed an awful lot. I think what has happened is that Meghan has created dots between incidents, and she's done like Iago did with Othello. Her pearls of wisdom are drops of poison whispered into the air of somebody who is receptive to an alternative scenario. She has played upon his weaknesses, and she has distorted his observations that were original and converted them into something entirely different. Re-education, I think we could almost call it. Jade Dye says, "Hello, Lady C. If Harry is writing a tell-all book, don't you think we should impress on him the pressing need to not forget to clarify the mystery about the birth of his children?" Now, that's an interesting one to alight upon, especially in the light of all that is going on behind the scenes. Well, I can tell you something. If Harry addresses the rumours head on and comes up with an exclamation that has the ring of truth about it, and the truth bell sounds sufficiently loudly for everyone to know that it is not yet another line that they are being delivered with, then he'll really have a bestseller. I can think of several ways as a writer that I would approach the subject with him, because it's a very meaty subject. and a lot of spin can be put on it. Interesting. I don't want to say too much at this point beyond that. Teresa N. Stoker says, won't the proposed Harry book need to go through legal review before it is released? It certainly will. All books of this nature are what's called libel read, and shorthand, it's called libeled. The books are libeled. They're read for libel. Now, libel in England, and we have English and Welsh law, and Scottish law is separate. We have two legal systems in Great Britain. One is the Scottish system, and the other is the English and Welsh system, and they are slightly different. However, all books of this nature, every book I've ever written has been libeled by very, very senior authorities. It will be very carefully libel read. In America, it's going to be much easier. In America, you can defame anybody you want, and if they can't prove malice, you can't get any damages. That's not so in England. However, the realities are that in England, if you sue for libel, even if you have been severely defamed, you only get about £200,000 maximum for damages. Yet your costs might exceed that by a quantum of 5 or even 10, depending on how rigorously the case is contested. That means that the person who sues them for libel will be out of pocket even if the claimant wins against them. Do I think that they know this? Remember, we're dealing with Rachel Zane. Slap him once, slap him twice, and slap him again. That's what we're dealing with. Rachel Zane. She'll know all of this. Is it a strong incentive to say exactly as you please? I will answer that in the next question. From a questioner, Lady C, I've read that Harry's friends might well call him out on his version of events if he mentions their name. How true is that? Well, anybody who joined Harry's and or William's circle, and or indeed mine, and or indeed the circle of anybody in the public eye, it is with a strict understanding that if you ever break ranks and impart information that you shouldn't, you are iced. I have iced people for saying things about me to the press that were not true. One of my oldest friends was the late actress Sally Formulo. I knew her family, I knew her brother, I knew her parents. Her uncle Stanley was an old friend of mine from before I even met Sally. And I met Stanley in the early 1970s. He owned an island in the West Indies. Sally sold a story about me in 1999 to the Mirror, and I found out about it. My children were friends with her daughter, and I wasn't going to break up my children's friendship with her daughter, who was a lovely child. So they kept on going to each other's birthday parties. Jade would come to the house, my children would go and play with Jade, etc., etc., I wouldn't allow Sally Farmlow to cross my threshold. And she quickly picked up that something had changed, and she actually asked me about it. She said, there's a problem. You know, I can sense there's a problem between us. And I simply cold-shouldered her. I said, what problem, Sally? Oh, how could there be a problem? Oh, I don't recall that we've had any words between us. What are you referring to? She knew well that I knew. And then some years later, we were all at a Boxing Day luncheon, and she decided to, because she was another publicity hound. She would have sold her mother to get in the newspapers. She was such a publicity hound. And let me tell you something, people like that, they have absolutely no scruples or morals. They will slit the throat of their mother if it suited them. And she sold a tissue of lies about me to the Express newspaper. And she thought, because I was spending most of my time in France at that time, that I wouldn't discover about it. And a mutual friend of ours called Mary Archer Shee, and for those of you who are into theatre, the Archer Shees are the family that Terence Rattigan wrote The Winslow Boy about. And Mary phoned me up and said, George, are you aware of the fact that you're in the Express today? And I said, no. And she told me what it said. I immediately went out and bought the paper and sued and got damages. And of course, stuck them with a large legal bill. So the point I'm trying to make is the one thing people in my sort of world and Harry's world do not forgive is public disloyalty. You can be as abusive as you want in person, and as long as it's not malicious, everybody will live with it and forgive and forget. Well, not forget, but live with it. Treachery? Oh no. Breaking ranks? Betraying secrets in public? Not a chance. Not a chance. Harry's friends, I am told, are ready and waiting to see if he betrays their trust, because they have never betrayed his. And if he does, he's going to find that there are rather more knives out for him than there were for Julius Caesar. And he's not going to say et tu brute once. Nor is he going to say it 15 times. He might have to say it 30 times, because the lacerations are going to come fast and furious, and they will do it in such a way that Harry is going to have no comeback. And I'll tell you better, all those people will have the approval of all of Harry's loved ones and all of the aristocracy. Harry just cannot decide that as the chief rabbi's son, he's going to join the Nazi party. It doesn't work like that. Toronto TSTS says, the British royal family needs to out Harry and his wife before big block capitals. The book drops with hard evidence. They are underestimating Harry and Meghan's relevance and the longevity in a postmodern era. People are way too angry about race, and if Harry's credibility is not shot down before publication, they won't survive this. Well, I hear what you're saying, and I think they might survive it, but there is a chance that they won't survive it. But I think they will survive it. But I think they will lose a significant number of supporters. The difficulty with a situation like this is if you are a decent person, which they are, you have fewer options open to you. You can't, like a thug, trail someone in the middle of the night and, like in 15th century Padua, just in the back. It doesn't quite work like that. But you can depend upon it that they will be doing what they can to try to avert this scenario. And I actually don't think they're going to be able to. I know from my experience with my mother that people like Harry and Meghan, no matter how many chances you give them, no matter how many times you think fences have been mended, bridges have been repaved, they will always come up with another scenario to trip you up. It's the nature of the beast. That's why I used to say to my mother, treachery, my dear woman, is not an accident. It is a character flaw. I just make the point for what it's worth. There are a few ways, it has to be said, that the royal family can, without going right down in the gutter with Harry and Meghan, there are a few ploys that they can adopt. You can depend on it. They will be doing what they can. I suspect, though, whatever they do is not going to be enough. I can think of several things that if I were an advisor to them, I would tell them to do. They would, of course, say they can't do them. But I know if I were in... Susan Koenig says, I think your 4 C's is actually 5 C's, as he is gunning for Charles too. To those of you who don't know the reference, in the last video, I included someone saying that Harry was going after 4 C's, Chelsea, Camilla, Cressida and Catherine. And Susan Koenig has actually come up with a 5th C, which is Charles. Yes, I understand that Charles is very decidedly in the sights, because this plays well with Meghan's agenda. And Harry is going along with it. Harry has even agreed with it. I have to say, I am completely gobsmacked. I'm going to put it in another way. They say that you cannot hypnotize somebody to commit a crime that they would regard as immoral if they were not under hypnosis. In other words, each human being, if you can't hypnotize somebody into doing something that they truly don't agree with, you can't convince them either, no matter how loving and how prevailing you are upon their good nature or their other nature. So this begs the question, if Harry can have his father in his sights, his father having spent all of Harry's life believing that they got along well, and Harry and his father having had a good relationship until it became in Meghan's financial and personal interest to no longer to have a good relationship with her father-in-law, or for her husband to have a good relationship with him. If Harry can have his father in his sights, and he does it whether by hypnosis or some other means of persuasion, does that mean that he was always capable of turning on his father unfairly? Well, I will answer it this way. There are certain things I would prefer to die rather than do. I wouldn't be able to live with myself. Well, even if I could, I wouldn't want to live with myself if I behaved in a way that I regard as debasing of my basic principles and my true character. I hope I've answered the question like that. And I'm going to wrap this up on a much lighter, more pleasant note, because I'd like us to have started with a bit of levity and end with a bit of levity too. Raluca Simpian says, "Hello, Lady C. Have you read the memoirs of Queen Maria, then in brackets Marie, of Romania, Queen Victoria's granddaughter? The Story of My Life was the name of the memoirs, and she quotes it. How can Harry and Meghan complain? Queen Marie and King Ferdinand of Romania were strangers in a new country, newlywed and having a difficult job to do, but they loved our country and did what was best for it. Thank you." Actually, I have read the memoirs of Queen Marie of Romania. I wrote a book that I pulled the plug on, but I've still got it, actually. I might even consider getting it published at some point. It's a novel, and I needed to read the memoirs of Queen Marie of Romania. This was in the 1980s. And my dear friend at the time, Julian Fellows, had the memoirs, lent them to me, and I kept them for about 4 or 5 years, the 3 volumes of memoirs. Yes, Queen Marie and King Ferdinand made sacrifices personally for the good of their country, and they were imports to the country. They weren't born in Romania. He was born a prince of Hohenzollern-Sigmaringen, and she was born an English prince. She was Princess Marie of Edinburgh, who then became Princess Marie of Edinburgh, as well as of Saxe, Coburg and Gotha, when her father became the Duke of Coburg. So neither of them was even a native Romanian, but they were utterly devoted to Romania. Romania enjoyed the greatest prosperity of the whole of its existence under their ministrations. With the result, they increased the size of the country significantly. They increased the wealth of the country. Queen Marie was one of the most famous women in the world in the first half of the 20th century. She died in, I think, 1938. But she was so famous that all you needed to do was mention the name Queen Marie of Romania, and everybody understood that you were speaking about a figure of tremendous glamour and great astuteness. But you see, I have no doubt that none of this would be happening had Harry and Meghan been in line for the throne. Queen Marie as Crown Princess Marie and King Ferdinand as Crown Prince Ferdinand made the sacrifices because they knew they were going to have the top job. People are very happy to sacrifice if they're going to get it all. It's the greedy ones who aren't going to get it all, but are going to get a lot, that want it all, that kick over the traces. There is no doubt in my mind that if Harry had been the heir to Prince Charles as opposed to William, none of this would be happening. Meghan would be happily cutting ribbons and making sure that everybody knew by ringing up the paparazzi about how wonderful she was as she cut ribbons, and as you know, her latest pregnancy was a manifest after 6 weeks, an explosive after 12 weeks. And all that's gone on would have gone on, but in a different way. She would have still made sure, and he would have still made sure, that they were grabbing the attention left, right, and centre, because they are both attention seekers and fame junkies. But they would have stayed within the fold. The problem has not been anything except he was never going to be number one, nor was she. And there are some people in life who, if they can't be number one, would prefer to kick over all the traces. And they have actually not only kicked over the traces and, in my not so humble opinion, behaved in the most appalling and disgraceful and disloyal manner to their family and the country and the institution of the monarchy. But if the payoff is being that they are setting themselves up or trying to set themselves up to be the king and queen of the rest of the world. The American version of king and queen, which in some ways is ludicrous because America abolished the monarchy. You can't, as an American, be, but the interesting thing is how the media in America are happy to present them as the American king and queen, the alternative king and queen, the king and queen of the Americas, and therefore really of the rest of the world. So they have sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, berthed their ship on the other side of the Atlantic, and they have set, or are hoping to set themselves up, and it has to be said, I think are succeeding in setting themselves up as the American version of royalty. Not the King and Queen of America, actually, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, American on-the-spot royalty that appeals to the elite in America, the 1%, Harper's Bazaar, Vanity Fair, People magazine, and their readers, the people who fancy themselves a cut or 10 above the average person, who, it has to be said, I have no doubt they all look down upon, because I see no noblesse oblige in any of what is going on or in their behavior. I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please like, subscribe, share, press the notification bell, and keep the questions coming in the comments section. Thanks and goodbye.